through a lot of things, but you know what? I was not one of the people that would be afraid of not listening, that I would be careful who I spoke to. People get angry or upset with them, they're afraid. Something really bad will happen, or they really get nervous about it. I have one example of this young man that I was tutoring. I was tutoring him for social skills. Such a nice kid. He wanted to go to a dance with this girl that was a friend of his. What do you think went through his mind before he asked her? What?
What if she says no?
What if she said, it wasn't what if, she will say no, and all these things. First of all, you're not going out with her, you want to go as friends. Everything was no. What I did, and I have I use my ASPE superpowers, perseverative behavior. I was on that with the tenacity of a bulldog on a stake. It took me 3 weeks. I got him to ask her out. Guess what happened? She said yes. Then he brought another set of problems. I don't want to wear a tie. I said, you know what? I don't like wearing a tie. I do have certain sensitivities to clothes, fabrics, and things being tight. But there's times that I have to play the game. If I'm in a business meeting, I have to play the game. If I'm at a wedding, I can't wear what I want. So I got him to do that. So a few weeks after, I asked him, so how did it go? I had a fantastic time. This changed his view towards socializing. He was less on the computer in his room, and he went out of the house doing more because he saw that there was a possibility for success. And everything that could go wrong will happen in their mind. I was pushed to do things from a very early age. My father looked at these situations in black and white. That you are going to do this, and that's it. There's no negotiations. They have poor self-esteem. Because you know what, a lot of times people say negative things about them. He can't do this, he can't do that. Let's focus on the positives that people can do and work on the things that they need work on. Empowering the people. Define what self-advocating is and is not. Why do I need to define it? There's one big problem. A lot of them cannot differentiate between self-advocating and being verbally aggressive. You have to differentiate the two because they could get in trouble otherwise. Have the students identify what self-advocacy is or is not. I'm using a scaffolding approach because it's going to more intensive activities. Then you do the role play. I'm a very big believer in role play. They will role play different situations where advocacy is occurring and have the students analyze it. What's happening? Why? What are you doing? Did it work or not work, and why? Have students practice self-advocacy through the role playing and have them generalize it in other classes. It has to be generalized. And you should use a scaffolding approach. I had this one young man, oh, I'm worried about an assignment, I'm going to fail all the negatives. I said, I'll go with you. The first time I went with him, I did all the talking. The second time, I spoke to the teacher and had him speak about his concern. Third time, I was in the background. The fourth time, I did not go with them. And he told me after that, you don't need to go with me. I wasn't unhappy, I was happy. That made my year. It was incredible. Obsessions. The albatross of the student with high functioning autism. I want to put a little disclaimer on this. I had a woman on the spectrum who told me this a few years ago. We were doing an evening together at the University of Central Florida. She focused on art, I focused on my teaching experiences. She said, you know what, you shouldn't use obsession, it's a strong interest, but it's an obsession if it interferes with your life and the possibility of socializing. You should use strong interest if it's not disrupting their life. What's your poison? Every person that lives with high-functioning autism has a strong interest or obsession. When I was 7, I knew every flag in the world. Why, I don't know. That won't even get me on Jeopardy. From 8 to 12, it was World War II until my father forced me off of that because I had nightmares. From 15 to 38, It was the Middle East. I read over 2,000 books on the Middle East. My daughter broke me of that. I said, you know what, I want to give my time to my daughter. My daughter's my everything, so that was a good reason to break it. The obsession usually has an undue influence on their lives and academics. I had one young man playing video games 6 to 7 hours a day and was having D's in his classes. What I did with the parents, I said, you know what? I know you don't want a confrontation. If he refuses to do what you ask, you remove the computer from the room. That's what needs to be done. The important stuff needs to be done first. Because you know what? I understand it. I was a little too old to really get that ensconced into computers. For me, it was books, because there was not much that you could do with a 16 megabyte computer. That's what they were when I was in middle school. But I'll tell people, I know there's some Aspies and Audies in here. You know, my wife calls my iPad my mistress. For male students, it's usually computers, gaming, a hobby, or an academic subject. And every male on the spectrum, not every, a lot of my kids, they want to be computer game testers. I said, you know what? So does every other male in the middle school that's into computers. For girls, it's usually computers, arts, an academic subject, or an animal. A lot of animals. It usually keeps them from socializing with others. They want to do what they want to do to the exclusion of everything else. Welcome back, moderating obsessions. Gradually scale back the time they spend on that interest. If it's computers, let them do their homework first, and let them have a computer an hour a night. Hour, and on the weekend a little more, and that's it. But do it gradually. Don't do it totally cold turkey, because you're going to have a very big problem on your hand. There are situations where you should take it away, but if it's not to that point, scale it back. To be successful in dealing with an obsession, there needs to be continuity at home. That was one of my biggest problems as a teacher in the classroom. Some of the things I was dealing with, the parents would not do at home, like with homework. I had one student, it was a pencil twirler again, that I got him to pass classes. Why? Because I worked with him after school. His mother was afraid of confronting him at home with his homework. So there has to be continuity. If there's continuity at home, he would not get to the situation where I would be working with him 2 to 3 days after school a week. Provide alternative activities and tangible rewards to cut back on time spent on the obsession. Find other things. If you like science, instead of looking at something on the internet, go to a science museum. Go to the woods. Go to a nature preserve. Many different things you could do. Try to adapt the skills from an obsession to academics or into a marketable skill. If someone's really into computers, find something that they could do with it. But do not do one of my obsessions, please. No BA in political science. Could you say gateway to graduate school? Encourage them to become more social. More and more and more. If they do more, they're going to be more comfortable and they're going to widen their zone of comfort. Shuttle diplomacy, the art of settling disputes of students living with autism. Individuals with autism have difficulty looking at an issue from someone else's point or view, because that's egocentrism coming in. They're looking at it from how they perceive the situation to be. That it's how they feel. They're not thinking about how someone else feels. And I stole one of my wife's lines. I don't have a crystal ball, and that's what I tell my students. I don't know. If you have something to say it, but express it in an appropriate way. They often cannot explain why someone feels a certain way. They look at the world, as I said, in a very egocentric way. If given the opportunity, they'll say what they feel without giving thought how others feel. I've heard things like you would not believe. I had one student tell me that one of his other teachers was a waste of biological space, and did not wonder why, did not see why that was negative. Although they are not intentionally trying to upset someone, people view them as insensitive, rude, or provocative. They tend to look at the world in a fixed and inflexible manner. Not in everything, but in certain things. Many will feel the other person is wrong and they're right. This creates a condition that sets the foundation for conflict. The conflict, if it's with a neurotypical, will be viewed as not major by them, but it will be seen as a casus belli by someone on the spectrum. We do not let go of things that upset us. There are things that I, with my wife, will remember from a month later. She will say, that was a month ago, I thought you were over with that. No. Tackling intransigence. Having students watch videos of actors in arguments, they have them verbally review each scenario and identify the conflict. I give you some suggestions and you have to be very careful. The high school students, I've used Big Bang Theory, but be careful because there's innuendo. Sheldon is perfect for this with his disagreements. If you want a safer choice, use Monk. Because I'm convinced he's on the spectrum. I wrote a letter to the creator and I never got a response back. I was probably put on spam. Have students watch teacher roleplay and identify the conflict and how it may be resolved. Students will roleplay different conflicts and find the solutions. You moderate it and have them find it themselves. So they can do it when you're not around. When students have a conflict, they'll use a mediation form, which I'll show you in a moment, with a teacher to try to find a solution. And students will use skills learned in order to avoid conflict and get along with others. So let's look at this. Here's a mediation form. Quite simple and point. What happened? You're going to get the first person's point of view, have them say what it is, then get the second person, then mediate it, and you're going to tell them what you think happened. How do you feel? They're both going to be angry, and you're going to have them tell you why they're angry. Why would this be valuable for each person saying why they're angry? What's going to happen?
It's going to force them to see the other.
Right, to see, thank you both, to see the other person's point of view. Not just to look at theirs. Who was at fault? Of course, they're going to say the other. But have them explain why and talk about it and moderate it to see what really happened. Then this is important. What could have been done differently to avoid it? Have each of them say what they think could have happened, and then work with them to what they could have done differently. Then how can there be a solution to the problem at hand? Have them each give a solution and work together as a team. And if you do this, what's going to happen over time, they're going to learn how to do it themselves, and you're not going to have to be around. Because the more you do it, the more it's going to be assimilated. And the self-esteem struggle. The learning curve in getting an audio or ASPE to believe in themselves. Often individuals with high-functioning autism do not view what their real capabilities are. An example of this was when I was in graduate school. I had a professor, who was a tough professor. I thought I failed this paper that I wrote. I thought it was horrible, garbage. I'm not going to tell you what it was because if I told you, I'd make all of you fall asleep. Is that obscure and dull? I went to him, I asked him, so he said, what do you think you got an F? I said, no, you got a 92. I could not see that I got a 92 in it. The first time I spoke doing this, I didn't know that I did well. I'd ask everybody, so how do you think I do, how do you think I did? I was not looking at what I was actually doing, that I had to have other people tell me. It's a matter of getting someone to believe in themselves, and that's what I do with my students. They are their worst enemies. They critique everything they do. It has to be perfect. I had a young man that had moderate functioning autism. He could not deal with X's or red marks on his test. So I found a solution. I didn't do X's and never used red. I put a circle around the ones that were wrong with a black pen. So he wouldn't have a meltdown and would not have the stress that it was horrible. Where a bad test is not at the end of the world to neurotypical people, most of you, the individual with autism, it will question their own competency. They see themselves as highly fallible people. This is a contradiction in terms. Now, I'm not saying everybody with autism is this way, but we have a sense of looking at ourselves at times, I'm not saying everybody, is intellectually superior, but then tearing yourself apart at the same time. Building the bridge to self-esteem. Have them write down how they see themselves, then have others tell them positive things about themselves. I did this with this young man who was brilliant. But what he would do, part of it was an act with the self-esteem, but the other part wasn't. He really didn't think he was that good of a student. He was a straight A student. He would get teachers to do part of his assignments at times. He was a little like, he was like Rose Nyland, but with intelligence. And he would say all these horrible things about himself that would really hurt me. I didn't want him saying these things about himself. I got each and every person in the class to say something positive about him. And everybody took turns saying something positive about someone else. Because getting people to realize what they are in a positive sense will really help with self-esteem. Encourage the student to say positive things about themselves and think positively. When a setback occurs, look at it in a realistic manner. This was an example that happened to me about 5 months ago, and I used it with my students that were complaining. I was speaking at University of Miami card. I was on my way, minding my own business, trying to get a snack. Behind me, I felt some boom behind me. My car went through bushes, was stopped by a stop sign. I nearly made a drugstore into a drive-through up front. My car looked like the Batmobile from the 60s. It was in a V, smashed in back. It had fins, but it wasn't made that way. I didn't flip out. I was a little dazed. Then, when the lady got the ticket, I said to the police officer, I don't have a car. Do you mind driving me to University of Miami? The head of University of Miami card saw me in the back of the police car and said, is there something you need to tell me, John? No, my car just got totaled. Are you all right? I was in pain for the next week. And he said, do you want to do the presentation? I'm going to be here anyways, and this is something I enjoy. And I looked at the positive. It was the first time ever my wife heard me speak. So I took a positive. I'm not saying I want to have any other car totaled by someone texting in the car next to me. But there were positives. Encourage them to take calculated risks. Reinforce their progress with positive, specific statements. Thank you very much.